This is a Dog Nation Postgame Show, brought to you by Kroger, R.S. Andrews, Jittery Joe's Coffee, Sir Gerald's, J. Stein Law Firm, and the UGA Bookstore. Here is your host, Brandon Adams.
Show here. We're live on the field, Jordan-Hare Stadium, where the Dogs have survived to get a 27-20 win against the Auburn Tigers. This was a thriller, perhaps more thrilling than many Georgia fans would have expected, but I think it's an important thing right now to have the proper context, the proper perspective on all of this. This was a game that Georgia obviously could have lost, and for long stretches today, perhaps it looked like Georgia might lose. And you can obviously get into the things that Georgia maybe did not do quite as well as it could have that led for all that to be true. Obviously, Auburn's on a team that coming in today we thought was going to be capable of beating Georgia. But ultimately, if you fixate on what led to that, I think you missed the actual point here, that a team that's given us so much to cheer for over the course of the last 20-whatever odd games that Georgia's won in a row gave us another thing to cheer for here today, finding a way to figure out how to get it done. I think survive is probably the word that we use here today. This was a game that could have gotten away from Georgia 19 different ways. Had a hard time containing quarterback run from Auburn. In the first half of this game, the Tigers were really throwing the ball very little at all, and yet they were still finding a way to have some success because of what Peyton Thorne and what Robbie Ashford were doing on the ground. Georgia having a hard time containing them on the outside. It seemed like Auburn was really blocking that up and fitting that up pretty well, and that obviously leads to some success. Simultaneous to that, Georgia had its own offensive issues once again, too. Not scoring in the first quarter today. Carson Beck throws an interception, missing the deep throw, the chance to connect with Oscar Delp. All of that was out there. You can talk about all the things that kind of led to what was a situation in which Georgia trailed for most of the day, but the most important thing is how Georgia responded when all that was said and done. And the name you're going to mention a lot tonight, at least I think you should, and I believe most of you will, that's the name of Brock Bowers. When Georgia absolutely had to have it, Brock Bowers was the guy who provided it today, including what turns out to be the game-winning touchdown, but also myriad, plays as well on the field goal to give Georgia the lead for the first time. Bowers making an amazing series of catches, and what has already been a storybook career for Brock here at Georgia. I don't know that he's ever been better than what he was tonight, and Georgia had to have it. So take a deep breath, wipe the sweat off your brow. Maybe not the way we thought it was going to be, not the way it's drawn up, and certainly a far cry from what the last two national championship teams have been. That's all true. But here's what else is true. It's 5-0, it's undefeated, it's a hated rival in a hostile environment, and it's Georgia emerging victorious with a chance to work on what it needs to fix and figure out what's going on, while also knowing that it's an undefeated football team here right now. So on our program tonight, we got room for everything in between. You can celebrate the win. I hope you will. You can talk about what happened that kind of led to the issues, and a lot of Georgia fans here having a good time. You love to see that. You can celebrate the win, and I hope you will. You can talk about some of the issues that led to this game being, one that for a good while perhaps maybe you thought Georgia was going to lose. We can talk about all of that in between, and I'm going to lean on you tonight to get us done on that. Your comments will be a big part of what we do here. Your live calls via the Zoom chat link that you'll see in whichever video platform you happen to be watching. We'll cover that, and we will get all of that going here tonight on our Dog Nation postgame show as Georgia finds a way to win here 27-20 over the Auburn Tigers. A couple of other thoughts here while we get the phones lined up and running. I thought that Carson Beck probably grew up a little bit before our eyes. There were a couple of throws today, early stages especially, in which Beck probably would like to have had those back. Probably should have connected, at least based on what I saw with my own eyes during the game. Probably should have connected with Oscar Delp on that one deep throw. And then to come back and throw an interception on the very next play, that's obviously an issue. That's a challenge. And yet, when you look at the first points that Georgia got, Beck's ability to stand there and take a shot on what was kind of an all-out blitz coming right after him, and then making some of those big throws here in the second half, once again when Georgia had to have it. Another guy I'm going to shout out here just for a moment. I thought you saw some nice things from Dalen Everett today, too. Everett, late in this game, had a couple of very key pass breakups. And obviously, Dalen probably has not had a perfect season to this point in time. Certainly probably no one from Georgia has. And Dalen may have even had his own issues here tonight. but he bounced back from those very well. A couple of key pass breakups that gave Georgia a chance to do what it needed to do to get Auburn off the field to get a chance to win this game. Shout out to Peyton Woodring, who's had some field goal misses already here this season. But tonight he made a couple of big field goals, and what turned out to be a 27-20 win. Every single one of those points mattered, and every single one of those points was incredibly important. So all of that on the table here, and kind of trying to figure out where Georgia goes from here and how we all respond to this. Those of us who are Georgia fans, those of us who live and die with everything that Georgia has, we've gotten used to over the course of the last couple of years expecting a level of dominance from Georgia, that Georgia comes out and completely throttles whoever's it's playing and absolutely renders that team in many cases. It almost seems like they're ready just for the game to be over with. Well, that's not exactly the way that Georgia's playing right now. We have to acknowledge that right now, perhaps this does not have the look of a national championship team. There's obviously plenty more, games to go this year for that to be figured out one way or another. But for now, if you wanted to be honest and say that's not exactly what Georgia is, I think it'd be fair to say that. But if you fixate on that and you don't appreciate the fact that in the midst of not exactly playing at a national championship level here right now, Georgia was still able to find a way to win and still able to kind of grow up before our eyes here, digging deep and shaking off a couple of near fumbles. You had the fumble, obviously, to begin the third quarter. My gosh, what a a heart-stopping moment that was. Then you had a couple of near fumbles, which frankly I just think were bad calls by the officials. The Dejon Edwards fumble and the Brock Bowers fumble. I'll use air quotes around that. I mean, Bowers had already gotten back up again before he put the football down, and somehow that's the ruling by the officials. But nonetheless, Georgia shaking all that off, finding a way to get a win. So once again, I'll tell you, right there in the chat where you're watching, Facebook, YouTube, DogNation.com, and all of those areas, you've got a chance to click the link, be a part of the show, and we're going to get you up on running here. In fact, I expect to get some contact from our folks back in Atlanta here in a moment, letting us know that we got some calls and ready to go there on all of that. Jeff Sintel, he's going to stop by, and he's going to tell us some things that he hears from a victorious Georgia locker room here in a moment. We'll kind of find out exactly how Georgia experienced this game here today. Whether you want the close games or not, close games are just a part of it. It's going to happen. It's going to go down that way. We kind of wondered, well, the South Carolina game a couple of weeks ago, is that an example of what Georgia had last year at Missouri, where in the regular season, that's the only close call Georgia really had for the entirety of the day? Is that what that was? Well, now we find out that no, that this is just a different kind of season. Last year it was 15 games, only 2 of them were even reasonably close. This year, through 5 games, Georgia's already played 2 essentially very close games, and one tonight that was undecided all the way to the zeros kind of hit the clock, or at least almost until the 58th, 59th minute to walk away a winner here. So we are reminded pretty frequently here this year that the overall story for this season, no matter how it ultimately ends, no matter where it's ultimately going, we are reminded that it is a different team and a different story being told. But for now, though, it is a story about Georgia wins, and they have certainly been impressive here thus far. All right, we're going to get your comments and get rolling here today, so click the link, be a part of this. We'll also read some old-fashioned comments here live on the field at Jordan-Hare Stadium, where a lot of Auburn fans have gone home very disappointed. They had convinced themselves their team had a chance to win. Perhaps Georgia fans feared the same thing, but UGA found a way to pull it out. Frank Montanaro, you're up first here on our Dog Nation postgame show today. Frank, what did you think about Georgia in a heart-stopping, thrilling win here on the Plains against the Auburn Tigers? Frank, how did you experience it?
Yeah, thanks, BA. It's great, as an old wrestling quote, was a slobber knocker to start with. But I guess, overall, I didn't really feel as worried. I mean, I know the level of competition is stepped up. It's a rivalry game. We're on the road, but I still feel like overall our offense, I felt like Carson Beck seemed comfortable today, over 300 yards again. It just felt like we were always there. The 2 turnovers, I think, crushed us. I mean, that's 14 points right there. If you look at that, it's 27 to 7. They don't score. If you look at everything else, they couldn't drive the length of the field. Those turnovers put them within position to be able to score on us. Other than that, they couldn't. Our defense held them. They couldn't drive the length of the field. Our defense stopped them every time. very, very impressed with the connection with Brock Bowers. We needed that all season long. That was just amazing to have over 100 yards in the fourth quarter. Very happy to have Ladd McConkey back. 4 catches. But what's more impressive is if you look at those 3 of those catches were all third down conversions from Ladd McConkey, which is huge. You need that receiver when he runs that route and he knows where the marker is. That catch, it's done. It's such a huge play for Georgia. I'm happy overall. We got to clean up the sloppiness on those turnovers, but other than that, very happy to beat Auburn.
Frank, I really appreciate you making the call, Frank. And one of the things that you bring up that I think is really important to echo here is the fact that Ladd McConkey, perhaps he wasn't on the field the entirety of the time, but just having him back today, by my count, do I have this right? 3 catches for McConkey today. All of them were monstrous catches. That's one of those guys that knows how to get behind a defense, knows how to help you move the chains, knows how to help you make some big plays. And I thought getting those moments from McConkey, any kind of contribution there from a guy like that, I think is really big. So getting him in the game today, giving him a chance to help Georgia move the chains, that turned out to be a really big deal. A couple other things I want to mention here, too, as we get the calls continuing to roll through here for a moment. Go back and look, second half, kind of like late third quarter here when the punt pins Georgia right back there against its own end zone. First down play, it's Dejon Edwards. He got, 16 yards in that first down play. Then you had Ra Thomas had a big catch for you. Thomas then left the game because of an injury. And then ultimately Brock Bowers also had a nice catch on that drive too, ultimately resulting, for Georgia the chance to get some very important points right there. Those were key moments in this game there as well. But you cannot say enough about Brock Bowers today. I think Bowers cemented really what we've been saying now for a while, which is this is the best player in college football. And obviously Georgia fans would not have wanted today's game perhaps in large measure to kind of play out the way that it did. But perhaps the fortunate byproduct of this is maybe more people tuned in and maybe more people get the realization of just how good Brock Bowers really is, because he was like Superman at the end of this game, and that is not overstating things. Ryan Walker, you're next up here in our Dog Nation postgame show. We're live on the field at Jordan-Hare Stadium. We're glad to have you with us. Ryan, Dogs survive. It was a heart-stopping thriller. What did you think about it?
Honestly, we had a heart-stopping thriller with Ohio State last year. I don't think anything would top that, but this was definitely a good game. But before I get started, I always come with different shirts or whatever. Rest in peace to Devin Willock. This is a piece that I put together for him. They're rocking the number 77, so it's only right for us to start that off with Mr. Devin Willock up in heaven looking down and smiling on his boys fighting through. Let's get to it. A lot of people owe Carson Beck an engraved apology. The kid grew up right in front of us. No, he didn't start off great. Let's just keep that real. 313 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was averaging 9.5 yards a carry. Should have connected with Oscar Delp on that deep shot that he had. Oscar would have probably ended up walking to the end zone. You can't replicate the impact that Ladd McConkey had today. I know he made a couple of catches, but they were key catches when we needed them for first downs to keep the drive moving. Same with Ra Thomas today. Dejon Edwards looked like Terrell Davis in his prime. Let's keep it real. That kid literally is a tough runner, and I honestly say that's the second coming of Terrell Davis to me. 2 touchdowns, did his thing, 78 yards. But let's get to the defense. Smile Monday showed up big, 7 solo tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. And then you had Malachi Starks with 9 solo tackles. I'm sorry. You had Javon Bullock with 9 solo tackles, 2 pass deflections. Malachi Starks with the game-clinching interception at the end, did his thing. And we got to give Marcus Rosemy-Jackson his flowers because he came up with some key catches for us. And people, you have to realize this. This is a team that have a lot of guys that have played football, but a lot of them have not been starters. So it is a difference between you being a starter and you being a guy that's a plug-and-play type of player. You have to understand the responsibility is a lot greater. You have a little bit more that you're dealing with. You're not going to be coming in with fresh legs, and you're going to come in there with the mindset where you get tired and you have to push through that, which Georgia did today. We didn't play our best football today, but we played our best when it counted to go ahead and take this game from Auburn right in that hostile environment. I think we still have a lot to work on, but looking forward to going into next week undefeated against Kentucky, 5-0. They trashed those stinking Gators. Not stinking, stanking Gators. They left them on the side of the road today.
I like
33-14. and we're going to do our thing next week. That's all I got for you, BA.
Ryan, I love it. Great phone call. I certainly appreciate that, and I agree with the point you made about Carson Beck there, too. You know, Beck is a guy that I think perhaps, if we're just being honest, some Georgia fans have been a little bit slow to embrace. Anything new sometimes takes a little while to get used to. But I thought today was a day in which we may look back on this and say this was the moment that Carson Beck truly became the Georgia starting quarterback. As the game went on, he made some big throws, made some big connections. As you mentioned, Marcus Rosemy-Jackson, Rod Thomas, a lot to Brock Bowers. This ended up being, I think, a pretty important moment in the overall maturation, if you will, of Carson Beck here as the Georgia starting quarterback. Cassie Turner, you're next here on the Dog Nation postgame show. Cassie, we appreciate it. Thanks for being with us. What do you think about the Dogs finding a way to win here this afternoon?
I mean, I definitely think it shows that they're fighters and they're willing to do it, you know, willing to go to the very end. But I would love to not do this again. This made me very nervous. I'm really proud of Brock and Ladd. They did amazing. People were making plays. I think Beck remained cool under pressure. And, you know, I can't say anything but good things about them. I mean, obviously there were some missteps on each side of the ball for Georgia. But I can't, you know, they both grew up and he figured out how to, you know, keep composure. And I really thought that was great. Obviously, we need to not drop the ball. That'd be great. That's it.
Cassie, good phone call. Appreciate that. And I agree with a lot of what you said. This was a heart-stopping, absolute, nail-biting game. And if you're a Georgia fan, you're like, I'm not quite so sure how many more of these I want to do anytime into the future, and I understand that. And, you know, ultimately, I don't mind telling you, to Cassie and anybody else, I have no idea right now how this season's going to end. You know, is this a proving ground for what's eventually going to be a championship team again? I don't know. Is this a harbinger for what's going to be some issues that ultimately plague Georgia and cost them a win? I don't know. I honestly right now cannot predict the future on that. Obviously nobody can. But here's what I can tell you. I don't know how many more that Georgia wins this year, but I am glad they won this one tonight. The winning streak that Georgia has, I'm glad it's extended at least another game. And if at some point in time it comes to an end this year, or if the mission, as we like to say, of go for 3 in 23, if that doesn't come to pass, then we'll deal with that then. But for now, I am glad that Georgia found a way to get it done. I am glad it did what it did here on Jordan-Hare today, and all the names that Cassie mentioned that helped make that possible. Boy, Georgia needed a lot of contributions in order for that to be the case, and obviously, ultimately, that's the way that it played out. Let's go to William Camacho. William, you're next up here on the Dog Nation postgame show. William, thanks for being here. We're live at Jordan-Hare Stadium. What did you think about this Georgia come-from-behind win against Auburn today? Hey, William, go ahead.
Well, BA, I was just not too happy with the slow start again. Can you hear me? I mean,
I sure can. Go ahead.
I mean, we're getting up to a slow start, and this is not looking too good. I mean, we really need to start cleaning up on this defense. Giving up 200 yards rushing is unacceptable. And this is going to be hurting us in the long run. We need to clean this up big time. Now, Carson Beck, he did perform very well in the hostile environment, which I was very happy. So, anyway, they got to really, and again, we're hurting on the turnovers. That's what's hurting us the most, right there, the turnovers. We can't be committing turnovers like this. We can't. Anyway, I hope that we can get back on track next week, home at night. I'm looking forward to next week. Thanks, BA. Go Dogs,
William, it's a good
baby.
phone call. Yeah, I appreciate it. William, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, and I think you bring up some points that need to be discussed. While on the one hand, it's absolutely terrific that Georgia found a way to win a game that for a long time it looked like it might not win. On the other hand, the stuff that led to the deficit, the stuff that led to the adversity, if you want to have a football conversation about that, it's obviously fair to point that out. You know, Georgia did get off to a slow start again today. Georgia now has played 5 regular season games. That's almost half the regular season. And obviously the first quarter represents I'm not a genius here, but I can tell you the first quarter represents a fourth of your total football played here. And Georgia's only scored 17 points for the entirety of the season in the first quarter. That's obviously not quite what you wanted that to be, but you can make an issue of the offensive slow start, which has been kind of something we've talked about a lot already this season. But honestly, as you touch on, the bigger deal here for Georgia today, if you want to kind of circle one thing and say, hey, Georgia was in a much closer game than perhaps it was supposed to be, it's really not the slow start offensively as much as it was. This did not look like Georgia's defense. And I don't know what Kirby's going to say about that in his post-game press conference. Sometimes he has a tendency to zig when we expect him to zag, and maybe he does that on this too. Maybe he's a little bit more calm, a little bit more measured about it all. Sometimes he is. But I think Williams said it flat out, and I think it's an undeniable point. You're going to have a hard time being Georgia if you're giving up more than 200 yards on the ground. 60 whatever of that came on the one Peyton Thorne run, but ultimately that ended up not really being a fluke today because that's the thing that Auburn kept going back to over and over again. And the best that I could tell, it looked like the Auburn offensive tackles and their kind of exterior blockers in the perimeter, they were just kind of getting to the edge and preventing Georgia from setting that edge and creating the opportunity to make the tackle there on the outside. A really uncharacteristic level of disappointing play from the Georgia defense today. It is more than fair to bring that up after this particular football game. Let's go to Jay Buchanan. Jay, you're next up here. We're live at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Jay, Dogs found a way to win, but made it hard for a while. What did you think about it?
Man, you know what? It is really hard to watch them at the very beginning. And somebody said it earlier best. A lot of people owe Carson Beck an apology. Now, I will say, when it comes to crunch time, we really do dial it in. But I'm excited for us to be able to actually get into a game and stop giving a head start. Let's look at South Carolina and today. Once we can stop giving that head start, I believe it's going to look a lot like the past 2 years before today. But that's the key thing for me. Once we can get out of that slump in the beginning, stop giving them a head start, and stop having to play ourselves into the game and start – we had to give time for Dejon Edwards to really look like the running back that he is. But once he started getting his legs underneath him and he got that touchdown, the passing game kind of turned on, which has sort of been the opposite for us, where the passing game is sort of – the running game has sort of opened up the passing game. Well, now we're looking at the passing game sort of opening up the running game. That throws Auburn off. That gets everybody moving. And then Brock Bowers is just, I just got to put it this way. He is a man among boys. Thanks, BA. Go Dogs.
Jay, it's an awesome phone call, and Brock Bowers is a man among boys. I mean, you felt like you were watching a Herschel Walker-level performance today from him, unlike, frankly, anything we've seen. Even in the last two national championship seasons, I don't know that I've seen an individual player take over a game the way that he did. I think you're absolutely right about that. I also agree with your point about Dejon Edwards. I think this is the kind of game that, for Dejon, that sort of gives you DGD status. Not to say that he wasn't already, but this is one of those things where, like, somebody somewhere in a tailgate conversation one of these days is going to be like, remember those couple of big runs that Dejon had and that Auburn game, including the 16-yard run to get you out of the back of your own end zone, basically on what ultimately resulted in some pretty important points for UGA. I thought for Dejon that was a pretty big deal. Let me get Scott Green. You're next up here on our Dog Nation postgame show. Scott, thanks for being here. Always appreciate your perspective on everything as it relates to Georgia. Go ahead and give us your thoughts.
Absolutely love the mentality of being able to survive almost everything going wrong and then making things go right, creating your own luck. The offensive line's cohesion is still kind of a concern, but make no mistake about it, Auburn threw everything they could at us. Love Beck's response. You have everything going wrong. It's your first, start. You're the number one team in the nation. Everything's on your shoulders, and you decide to turn it up in the second half. And thank God for Brock Bowers, too. Linebacker play, which I never thought would be a real concern, to me seems to be a point of not weakness, but a point of vulnerability. So there's a lot to work on, but it's one of those games that you're glad you played and you're glad you won because, it's going to help you build and move forward. So.
Yeah, good phone call, Scott. I appreciate that. A couple of points for me to build off on what he said there. First of all, when it comes to the offensive line, there was some shuffling here today. We saw Dylan Fairchild get the start. He also wore number 77, the number that, as we've mentioned, is being shared in honor of the memory of Delvin Willick, of course. But there were also moments today where Micah Morris comes in, plays in place of Willick there. In place of Fairchild there, playing in place of Fairchild there at that left guard spot. And so you did see some movement there, some rotation taking place. So this is a Georgia team right now that is obviously trying to figure out what its best five is along the offensive line. That's pretty obvious. And then when it comes to the linebacker situation, you also get the impression here that there are a couple of moments in which, to me, it looked like we saw linebackers just getting swallowed up by Auburn blockers and not maybe shedding that block the way we're kind of used to that seeing. It was a little bit of a different visual for me to see some of those Auburn offensive linemen kind of getting to that next level and having some success blocking some of those Georgia linebackers. That was certainly the perspective and the perception that I had from watching that there. Let's get Isha. Isha, you're next up here on our Dog Nation postgame show. We're live at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Isha, what did you think about this Georgia win here tonight?
Different. It does show some perseverance in the game. I stepped away for a minute and found out we had after the third quarter and saw that the replay of that fumble. So that caught me off guard. But I caught some of Ryan's comments when he was on here. But with that, hold on, let me turn this down. With that, with some of our defensive play. And then I think in the beginning, if anybody a lot of people getting rushing yards, but they're not. The rushing yards aren't from rushers. They from running back. Quarterbacks breaking the pocket and getting a lot of rushing yards. I'm not too worried about some of that because it happens everywhere. But the scheme that they were doing, they had the ends crashing right in the middle to try to prevent whatever. And then they was relying on everybody else to play. So that's how a lot of times they made a lot of big plays running the football. Not totally worried about that, but the scheme I am. And it seemed like that was their plan because I seen them crashing down on too many plays and then they was getting outside. To me, playing defensive end, one of my lightest positions playing, you got to protect that outside, and they let that outside get out of control all game for the most part. And it just, and you know, the play that with Brock Bowers and everybody been talking about Brock Bowers' play. I think collectively the team played great. Dejan did what he had to do when he needed it done. So did Ladd. So did Rosemary St. Jackson and Rara and all those guys played a great part in this comeback. That's what I call it because we were down 10 points and getting this win. It just, I know a lot of people are going to have all kinds of stuff about the defense, all these things and whatnot, but as a defensive team, at least as a player, you're not trying to worry about a running quarterback, except for when they are rushing quarterback. You worry about containment of the passing and containing the quarterback. There's going to be times where the quarterback breaks open. A lot of people ain't going to understand it because they're looking, somebody did this, somebody did that. It's going to happen. You make do and live it. When the defense had to get a stop, they got to stop. We just got to tighten up on that red zone.
No, I think that's a good point. Yeah, no. Isha, I appreciate the call. I think that's a really good point. That I love what you say there at the end, that when the defense needed to get that stop, they got the stop. Obviously, for a lot tonight, that was not the case. And, you'll talk about the propensity for slow starts. And, last year what we maybe would have thought was, this is a Georgia team that's not, fully invested, fully interested. Sometimes it sort of seemed like their, level of motivation would wane from week to week depending on who Georgia was playing. I honestly don't believe that's quite what's going on here. And, Isha, perhaps you might would have agreed with that too. It seems like right now this is a Georgia team trying to figure out and kind of find itself here a little bit. That the issues where Auburn had success, with Thorne early and, Georgia, not quite, finding its points until a little later in the game, that to me doesn't come down to, it's a slow start and a motivational type issue as much as perhaps that just kind of comes down to this is not a Georgia team right now playing at a dominant level. But It is a team that's winning. It's 5-0. It gets the rivalry win tonight on this turf here at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and that is certainly something that Georgia fans can appreciate as they try to figure out where this team is perhaps heading from here. Before we go back to phones, let me also remind you that next Saturday we are back at the UGA bookstore for obviously a home game and a night game against Kentucky. Atmosphere for that expects to be amazing. Kentucky, as one of our callers mentioned earlier, did get the win against Florida here today, so that's a Kentucky team that also comes in undefeated next week. What a scene that's going to be. And, of course, after the game, we'll see you back at the UGA bookstore. So come up and see us on the second floor up there. But before the game, go enjoy the great autograph guests the UGA bookstore always has. Get stocked up for the apparel for the stretch run of the season that's about to be here. 4 ranked opponents for Georgia coming up in future weeks. Florida going out, Kentucky in all likelihood coming in. So you're going to be decked out for some really good football because there is some really good football along the way. We're going to get Jeff Sintel, some thoughts from him here in a moment. Let me also go back to Randy here. Randy, you're next up on our Dog Nation postgame show live from the field at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Randy, a lot of Georgia fans weighing in tonight. What did you think about this win?
BA, can you hear me?
I sure can, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, great. A lot of things going on. I've got the TV on right now in my office here, and the halftime score is LSU and Ole Miss playing. Ole Miss is winning 31-28 at halftime. That's
wow.
Amazing right there. But getting today, I was a little scared. I was getting ready to say Halloween's here early, okay? But, yeah, I was a little scared. And you could tell Jeff Sintel right here, he said his favorite Georgia team of all time is 2008. And this is for him, but he needs to toss this if this team wins the national, or when they win the national championship again. That should be his favorite team. But just want to say, Ryan Walker and Steve in Virginia, yes, Carson Beck grew up today. They made those comments, and Carson Beck grew up today. And the last thing I want to say, 2 All-Americans showed up near the end of the game. Brock Bowers and Malachi Starks, 2 All-Americans.
No, I think that's exactly right, Randy. A good phone call, too. And the other thing I noticed on the Malachi Starks interception is, Jeff, if you want to pop over here, we'll get your thoughts on this. Actually, Jeff's working. We're going to let Jeff work. Sorry about that. I thought he was just scrolling on his phone. But on the interception that Starks gets, Mikael Williams also had some pass pressure on that. Not the most, he wasn't going to sack him or anything like that, but I did notice that that's the other big defensive player that I think you're going to be counting on a lot in the second half of this season, and he kind of had a little bit of pass pressure there, which ultimately provides the opportunity for Malachi Stark to get the interception. Starks, pound for pound, I think has been Georgia's best defensive player through 5 games. He does come up, and he makes that big play late, and I think you celebrate that. Michael Morrow joins us here on the Dog Nation postgame show. Michael, you're next up. Glad to have you with us. Michael, what did you think about tonight's win?
I was a little concerned now about the defense. The offense did exactly what I thought they were going to do. Beck, threw an interception. I figured he might do that. I think they responded very well. They leaned on Brock Bowers when they needed to, and God knows they needed to. But the defense, to me, allowed way too many points considering what this team did a week ago against Texas A&M. They couldn't catch a cold. Nobody could do anything on the offense as Auburn, but yet somehow they just managed to show up tonight. And I know every Saturday is every Saturday, but it just seems like they didn't make any halftime adjustments. It was down to the wire. And, maybe there's some stuff they can see on film. Maybe there's some things that they can learn from this, and I certainly hope they do. But the defense has got to tighten up if we're going to make another run at the playoffs.
We should point out here that this is not just any Michael Morrow. This is the legendary Mad Dog, the most prolific winner of Golden Shoes in Dog Nation Daily history. A lot of you didn't know what Mad Dog looked like, but this is Mad Dog, who you hear in our Golden Shoe section almost every single day. Mad Dog, I appreciate that. That's a really good phone call, and it's also true. And I mentioned this a moment ago, and I'll circle back to it here right now, is that I think on a show like this, we go an hour for a reason, right? We want to talk about the main headline, which is, I think, Brock Bowers stepping up and playing the way that he played and allowing Georgia to get the win. But also in the range of conversation, you have a little bit of room to also talk about what it was that put Georgia with its back against the wall quite so much. And, it was not, to me, the slow start offensively, although that was certainly another issue to deal with. the thing that you got to confront here right now is this is not a Georgia defense the way we're used to seeing it be. And I don't know that I necessarily have a very easy explanation for why that is, but we're all able to look at it and just see that as of right now, that's not quite what Georgia has going on here right now. That's just not quite what they are. Now, can they be by the end of the season? Perhaps. Can you still achieve end-of-season goals? We know what those are for Georgia with a good, not great defense. Well, it probably needs to be at least a little bit better than it was tonight. These are all the kinds of questions that you're going to be kind of asking here. But this was, man, I don't mind telling you, this was shocking. It was shocking to see Georgia. The thing I compared it to was back in 2020 and the Florida game when the wheel route kept working over and over and over again. And you could almost erase that and explain that away with, it's pandemic, Georgia's not really practicing, whatever else. And I say that half kiddingly, half seriously. But, that was just an odd season all the way around. This is not a moment when you expect to see Georgia just completely bamboozled by the same play over and over again. But that's kind of what that situation was. So we're following that, obviously. But clearly, this was not the kind of Georgia defensive performance that we're used to seeing. Got a Georgia fan joining us now. Brock Bowers' jersey on full display here. And good night to be wearing the number 19 because number 19 was indeed the hero once again for Georgia here this evening. What did you think about this Georgia win over Auburn?
Well, I know that we've had a lot of complaints from fans, and probably rightfully so. But we just beat a SEC foe on the road in one of the most hostile environments in the country, not just the SEC. I think it was me and Foster Moss were talking last week about we'll just be happy with a win. This was the game that was supposed to concern us, and it did. We have a lot to be thankful for, BA, and right now I'm thankful for God, I'm thankful for the Bulldogs, and I'm thankful for an ice-cold beer.
Amen. Amen to all three. That sounds fantastic, and I really appreciate that. That's really, I think, wise words there on that. And I do think we're in a stretch in the season for Georgia now where, as you said, the idea of kind of doing this sort of beauty contest style evaluation of, what's happening for Georgia and did they put up enough style points and things like that, I sort of think we're kind of beyond that for Georgia here right now. We are in a stretch of the season for UGA where it's sort of just enough to win the game. Now, you can certainly say, well, you're not going to win a national championship playing the way you played tonight. That's probably true, I would say. I would say that a performance like this, if this represents Georgia's top end, then, the whole idea of go for 3 and 23 is probably not going to quite end up the way we want it to. That's probably fair to say. But it's also many months from now before you have to worry about that too much. For now, it's sort of about, do you find a way to win? Do you find a way to go out there and get that done? And that's what Georgia did, and that's why I like that call so much, because kind of viewing it that way. And I think the Kentucky game next week, kind of the same type of thing here, where, Kentucky's also undefeated. Now, I think some of that's probably a little smoke and mirrors. I don't know how much I think about Florida necessarily, but the one thing that Kentucky's also shown you is the same way that Georgia likes to play at its deliberate pace and, kind of operate on its own schedule. Kentucky does that itself, too. And if you get into a situation where you allow yourself to get off to a slow start next week offensively again, Kentucky's liable to keep that football. And if you have another ill-timed turnover like Georgia, did here tonight, once again, you're talking about a situation in which you could be in some real trouble. So it's a situation that those of us who are Georgia fans have not had too much time getting used to, but I believe you better buckle your seatbelts here a little bit. We had to see Georgia come back from a 10-point deficit to beat South Carolina, another double-digit deficit to beat Auburn here tonight. I'm guessing that if this season starts progressing the way Georgia fans wanted to, there are probably going to be a few more of these nail-biter style games just based on the nature of this team here right now. We'll get back to your calls here, and obviously if you're joining us via DogNation.com or the Dog Nation YouTube page or the Dog Nation Facebook page, you can click the link that's in the comments section and be a part of our show. We've had some fantastic callers here tonight, really 2 weeks in a row. Our post-game call-in show calls, I think, have been really, really terrific. Speaking of terrific, though, no one tonight more terrific than Brock Bowers, and I think I was more impressed with him tonight than I've ever been before. And I say that knowing full well that he almost had 200 yards in last year's national championship game. He had the catch against Florida where he's, batting the ball in the air to himself and all the crazy things that he's done. But tonight was Bowers at his best when Bowers really had to do it. And if you think about this, and this thought has just kind of popped in my head here, and y'all check me on this and see if I'm right. We've seen Brock do so much in his Georgia career, but just on the basis of the kinds of wins that Georgia's mostly been getting, dominant blowout wins, how many times have we seen Brock Bowers have to be clutch? Now, I'm not saying he isn't clutch. I'm saying you can't be clutch when you're playing a game in which your team's winning by 30, 40 points. Well, tonight we saw Bowers have to be clutch. Maybe for the first time. Obviously, the Ohio State game, there were a couple of those moments. You want to go back to the Alabama game in 2021 when he had the touchdown in the fourth quarter to extend Georgia's lead. So there have been obviously a couple of moments in which Bowers converts the fourth down against Ohio State, the touchdown against Alabama. He's had a couple of those moments, but that's not really been the hallmark of Bowers' career as much because Georgia's always winning games in such convincing fashion. But tonight we once again got to remind ourselves that Bowers absolutely has that clutch gene when need be. He can absolutely do that, and he did that here tonight. And he is our player of the game here, presented by the J. Stein Law Firm. There aren't too many instances in Dog Nation postgame show history. We've had back-to-back winners of the player of the game, but if there was ever someone deserving of that, it is obviously Bowers, both now and forever. Brock Bowers is, in my mind, one of the Mount Rushmore players in Georgia football history. Herschel Walker's on there. I think Brock Bowers is on there. You can debate the other names. You know, we've talked about David Pollock, Nick Chubb in the past. Everybody's kind of got their own unique four. But if you're going to put someone from this national championship era, and I believe that you should, to me, Bowers is the one from that most deserving. He's also our J. Stein Law Firm player of the game. Congratulations to Brock for the big game that he goes out there and does. What was it, 100 yards in the fourth quarter alone? Is that what we're going to say? And obviously what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown. So I want you to find J. Stein Law Firm online at jsteinlawfirm.com. Of course, Josh Stein and his entire team there. This is a law firm that does really personal service for you if you've been hurt or injured in an accident. Someone you love has been hurt or injured in an accident. It's not your fault, and you need to be made whole. You need some retribution for what's happened to you. That's what the J. Stein Law Firm is going to work hard to do. Plus, Josh Stein's just a big-time dog fan. He's what we call a double dog, a two-time UGA graduate, including a graduate from UGA Law School. So this is a dog helping other dogs in a time of need if you've been hurt or injured in an accident. Plus, there are a lot of these, personal injury firms that you're advertising, and they got thousands of attorneys. It's like nationwide. They don't know who you are. They don't know the first thing about you. Some of these big personal injury firms that you see, doing a lot of advertising, at least you would presume they might not because they're so big that they're may not giving you the personal attention you deserve. But that's not going to be the case when it comes to Josh Stein and his team there at the J. Stein Law Firm. They're going to give you the kind of small firm, sort of the boutique firm feel, giving you personal attention in your personal injury case. So find them online, jsteinlawfirm.com. That's jsteinlawfirm.com. By the way, we're getting some word here from the CBS broadcast tonight that Gary Danielson kept saying that Brock Bowers ought to be considered for the Heisman Trophy if they don't give it to a quarterback. I mean, listen, at the very least, I'd love to see him be a Heisman finalist, but I honestly do believe, this is as genuine as I'm capable of being. I believe that Brock Bowers is the best player in the country. And listen, we know how good Caleb Williams is. We understand that. Typically speaking, you don't give the Heisman to the same guy 2 years in a row. Now, maybe you should sometimes, but that's just been the tradition going back to Archie Griffith in the 1970s. Ever since then, when Heisman Trophy winners have returned the following season, they've not won the award again. So the thought here is that someone other than Williams is going to win it here this year. But while we typically think of this as a quarterback's award, who is the quarterback that's running away with this here right now? Or who is the quarterback that's really even asserted himself into this conversation here thus far? I mean, you might say Quinn Ewers. I guess that's not a bad name, I guess. Jordan Travis perhaps is a part of that conversation a little bit too. But for now, we're looking at a situation where, I think that you have to very much view a Heisman Trophy race right now as being completely wide open. And so much so that you may bring in some non-traditional candidates like a Cam Ward from Washington State or, a Michael Penix from up there in Washington, who perhaps is a little bit less non-traditional because right now Washington's a highly ranked team. But the point I'm getting to is that not only do I believe that Bowers is the best player, I also believe this is one of those years in which you've got the opportunity potentially for an unorthodox winner. So I know this sounds like massive spin control, and perhaps it is. While I never would have wished this game to play out the way that it did, my heart can barely even stand it. While I would never wish the game to play out the way that it did on national TV to sort of set the stage for the hero performance, the hero turn from Bowers there at the end, I got to tell you, that actually ends up working out pretty well. So nice to hear Gary Danielson giving him some love, and I think it's important to note here that these are the final times we'll see Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson, calling these games on behalf of CBS for the SEC. Obviously, that contract comes to an end at the end of this season. I know that Gary Danielson hasn't always been everyone's cup of tea around Dog Nation. I think most people like Brad Nessler. I believe they should. I think he's an outstanding play-by-play man. But Danielson, on the other hand, the analyst, the color commentator, is a little bit of a lightning rod for criticism from time to time. And I know he's not always the Georgia fans' favorite, but I think we're going to miss this era of SEC football. A lot of really fun and special things have happened for the SEC on CBS. It was kind of fun to be in that 3:30 time slot and having Georgia find a way to get a thrilling win over Auburn. Kind of felt like old times there in some respects because of that. We're going to get Jeff Sintel here coming up in a moment. We'll also get some of your comments here the traditional way. And if you want to join us via phone calls, we got some time for you to do that there too. John Adams pointing out an interesting point here live on YouTube that some of the injuries that Georgia has had has perhaps hurt Georgia in practice, which is also maybe hurting them in games. They're not getting the same kind of practice reps because they haven't been able to go full go with their entire roster depth. And John, you may be onto something. That may be a fair point worth considering. Frank Patterson says he can't believe the Big Ten's going to have the CBS, the music, the da-da-da-da, that song. Yeah, that's going to be property of the Big Ten here moving forward because those games are going to be Big Ten games on CBS moving forward and not the SEC. In fact, what was it, last week that you had, or was the Georgia game the first time against South Carolina when you had Nessler and Danielson actually doing the primetime Big Ten game as opposed to the SEC game, kind of greasing the wheels for that change that's going to take place? Avion Curry, I like this, wants to coin that last possession as the drive. Carson Beck's moment, survive, and advance. And that's kind of one of the cool, I think, themes that's emerged from our show thus far today is that, shaking off an interception, shaking off a first quarter with no points scored. It does seem like Carson Beck has won over a lot of Georgia fans today with how he played down the stretch, making some big throws, and you certainly like to see that. We got time for more of your phone calls there as well. Randy from Tifton, you're next up. Randy, make sure you unmute yourself and then fire off a take up at these dogs. Randy, we're glad to have you with us.
Hey, BA, how's it going? I tell you what,
I'm doing great, Randy.
We had a party over today, and we had a lot of people over, and I told everybody just calm down. Beck grew up today, and Bobo played his best. Bobo called his best game of the year, and we had a great time today, and Georgia's going to be okay. Yes, the defense didn't play that great, but we're going to be all right.
I love it, Randy. I appreciate it. Randy, of course, part of our Dog Nation cruise back in the springtime. I know he's bragged about being a part of Dog Nation Invasion on the Tennessee River coming up in November. And listen, Randy's also a man that's usually fired up and ready to go. So if Randy is at his game watch party, and if he's the one that's the voice of reason, if he's the one calming everybody else down, that's something to keep in mind here to give you an idea of what the emotional fever pitch around Dog Nation was all day long. Because normally it's Randy who's cutting the pro wrestling style promos and getting everybody fired up and getting everybody ready to go. So if Randy's calming everybody down, that gives you an idea. There was a lot of angst around Dog Nation here today, and I think that was true. I mean, I don't mind telling you this. There's that moment in which, as someone who kind of does the dual role of being a fan and obviously wants Georgia to win these games, but also having a job to do, cover the games. I'm sitting in the press box with the rest of the Coastal elites, and there's that moment in which the little butterflies get in the stomach, and you realize, oh, boy, we hadn't seen Georgia lose in a long time, and they are teetering on the brink where it could possibly happen. I have to say a lot of us were kind of feeling that way. I jokingly said on Twitter when the game was over, never a doubt. Well, obviously we know that wasn't quite true, but Georgia, to its credit, found a way to get this win. Don, you're next up here in the Dog Nation postgame show. Don, what'd you think about UGA tonight? Hey, Don, go ahead. Don, you're live on the air. You can go ahead and speak. Don, you can speak. I don't know if Don can hear me right there. Let's see. Don, I'll tell you what. If you want to get back in, we'll try to give you a chance to go here in just a moment. But we'll get you on. We'll get you and give you a chance to talk about that. And, Don, we'll see how you're doing here. We'll also get Jeff Sintel coming up in just a moment there as well. Let me also, while I have a moment, give a shout-out to our friends at Cercheros there, too, because, a moment ago, our buddy Randy mentioned having a big game-watching party. And, listen, when there are game-watching parties to be had, one of the things that makes those game-watching parties even more fun is when you have the spread catered from our friends at Cercheros, really your headquarters. If you want to get a great meal and a great catering meal of food for all the folks you have over to watch football here on Saturdays, our friends at Cercheros give you a chance to do that because they can give you the burrito party platter, the taco and fajita bar, freshly grilled meats, guac, queso, Of course, all your favorite fresh toppings there as well. And the good news is, around the state of Georgia, 25 locations, including right in Athens there as well. So I want you to find them online at Cercheros.com for more on that. That's Cercheros.com. And by the way, after the first week of the season, y'all gave me a bunch of grief because I got my Northeast Georgia accent going. I was not saying it right. I think since then, I've actually had the pronunciation nailed pretty well. Cercheros, right? Not Sucheros, but Cercheros. I've been saying it pretty well since then. So I may not be the smartest tool in the shed or whatever, but eventually I'll figure out a way to get it right here. So we appreciate Cercheros being a part of our Dog Nation game day coverage all season long, including right here on the Dog Nation postgame show there as well. We had someone a moment ago, I believe it was our buddy Randy Hall, who mentioned the score right now between Ole Miss and LSU. We'll also give you an update on other scores from around the SEC coming up here in just a moment. And we'll take your calls. You have more time to do that. We've had a great collection of calls here tonight. We'll also read some of your comments there as well. JC says, good to see Ladd out there today helping out. His catches were big for the Dogs. Yeah, we said this a little bit early, and it bears repeating here right now. McConkey's a guy that right now not healthy enough to play the full game for Georgia, but in a limited number of snaps, he is more than capable of making a very, very big impact on this game. What do you have, 3 catches overall? I don't have the stats in front of me here right now, but I believe it's 3 catches. All of them were huge, moving the chains, doing big things. That's kind of what Ladd McConkey was doing here today. Lesko says, obviously, Georgia was pretty ginger in how it used him. Yeah, we've said this a few times, Lesko, that I think the overall injury situation with Ladd McConkey, this is not one of those like Georgia injuries we sometimes have where it's, Kirby says we're hopeful to get him back, or Kirby says, week to week, day to day, whatever else. But like privately, there's kind of an internal timeline that's obviously expressed a little bit differently than what's said publicly. We've seen a lot of Georgia injuries where that was kind of mostly the case and mostly true. I don't think that's necessarily what this is here right now. I think there's obviously a little bit of uncertainty surrounding the McConkey injury. Ladd's obviously working as hard as he can to be back and ready to go, and Georgia was very thankful to have a contribution from him. And this is what it is. I mean, y'all, this is the way that 99% of all college football fans live. They live watching their team play a game. You may put 50 or 60 guys on the field, and you're just hoping that somebody somewhere does one little thing that makes winning a little bit more possible. And if you add it all up, a couple of catches from McConkey, big catch from Marcus Rosemy-Jacksain, a couple of batted balls, or I should say passes broken up by Dalen Everett. You start circling all the little things that add up to a really big Georgia win here today. Alex Waller also pointing out another important moment from this game. This is a commenter who's watching us on YouTube, that we obviously saw Ra Thomas make a big catch for Georgia and then immediately left the game with injury, goes into the injury tent. I don't have an update on that for you, but maybe we can get one. I know we're going to try to get Jeff Santel on the show here coming up in just a couple of minutes. We'll see if we're able to do that with him, and perhaps Kirby Smart did talk some about that on his post-game press conference here. In fact, why don't we do this? Let's let you hear a little bit from Kirby Smart a moment ago. We'll see if we can get Jeff here for a second. We'll take a few more of your comments there as well, and we'll just have our final reflections here on a Georgia win against Auburn here at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Georgia finds a way to get it done. It was a thriller, and Kirby Smart no doubt had plenty to say about that after the game. Let's see some of that right now as a part of our Dog Nation postgame show.
A lot of credit goes to Auburn and their atmosphere. I told the television stations afterwards, incredible atmosphere every time we come here to play. They got one of the most loyal fan bases there is. They got a lot of respect for him and the job he's done, and great atmosphere to play in. Obviously, we didn't play our best game today, but we're a very resilient team, proud of the way we competed, and we got to continue to get better. I mean, that's the most important thing for our team. So a lot of things we did wrong, a lot of things we did well. But we're not going to get where we want to go if we don't get better. So that's the biggest thing.
Just tell them after the game, Coach.
Proud of them. Resilient as hell. Competed. The leadership of this team has shown through twice. And, you don't know how many times you're going to be able to do that. When you turn the ball over and you give people extra possessions, you just can't do that. Good football teams don't do that. And good football teams don't, let people run the ball on you for 200 yards. That's one of the things that we knew they could do well. Thought they really ran the ball well, and they used the quarterback and rushed the ball on us. We can't do that, and we got to be able to run the ball better too. But proud of the way the guys fought.
Kirby, you were confident at halftime. Where did all that confidence and poise come from for this team? They hadn't been in a situation like this before on the road.
Well, we haven't been on the road. I mean, so it's like in the SEC, I don't think people respect playing on the road in the SEC as much as I do. Being an SEC player, a veteran of this league, it is really, really hard to win on the road. And all you guys see is one versus whoever.
A lot of credit goes to Auburn and their atmosphere. I told the television stations afterwards, incredible atmosphere every time we come here to play. They got one of the most loyal fan bases there is. They got a lot of respect for him and the job he's done, and great atmosphere to play in. Obviously, we didn't play our best game today, but we're a very resilient team, proud of the way we competed, and we got to continue to get better. I mean, that's the most important thing for our team. So a lot of things we did wrong, a lot of things we did well. But we're not going to get where we want to go if we don't get better. So that's the biggest thing. What you tell them after the game, Coach?
Proud of them. Resilient as hell. Competed. The leadership of this team has shown through twice. And, you don't know how many times you're going to be able to do that when you turn the ball over and you give people extra possessions. You just can't do that. Good football teams don't do that. And good football teams don't, let people run the ball on you for 200 yards. That's one of the things that we knew they could do well. Thought they really ran the ball well, and they used the quarterback and rushed the ball on us.
All right, so if you want to go to the Dog Nation YouTube page, you can hear the rest of the Kirby Smart press conference there. Full comments on a win tonight against Auburn. But you get a chance to hear Smart talking about the challenge of winning in a tough environment. Jeff, you were on the field, incredibly loud crowd, and we say this all the time. As a Georgia fan, we're Auburn haters, and we find plenty of reason to make fun of Auburn. But the one thing we do take pretty seriously is they find a way to make this environment very, very tough to play in. Now, Auburn on the road, they lay down like quitting dogs. They do that all the time. But when it comes to playing here at Jordan-Hare Stadium, they have a tendency to play pretty tough, pretty well. That was another example of that here tonight. So I guess let me do a couple things with you. Starting off here on our Dog Nation postgame show, give me the feeling you had on the sidelines, during the game, on the field. What were you seeing from the Georgia sideline, from a body language standpoint, the intensity of the noise, the intensity of the crowd? We were in the press box. That's a closed-off environment. You had a little bit of a different experience. What was that like for you?
So it's funny. There's a lot of thumbnails in this game, but so one thing I saw, like they put Carson Beck under duress a little bit, down 10-0, down 17-10. Carson finds a way while he's watching the defense. He's off by himself, Brandon. Like he's literally isolated from the rest of the team after he's been on the headset, after he's gotten calls. He's went over like what they saw to polish up the next drive, and he's really just like animated, but he's like kind of like Zen, I would say, and. You sit there and you see Georgia. I thought this was a game where this is the ultimate recipe for an upset. They gave them momentum. They turned the ball over. I think Georgia was -2 again in turnovers today, even counting the last interception by Malachi Starks. I was dumbfounded, Brendan. I've never seen a team run the ball on Georgia like that. They had 145 yards at the half, 148 at the half.
A lot of that came on one play, but then the continuation of that in the second half kind of turned that into a very real thing.
Yeah, 61 yards came on that one play, but like it almost got to the point where I thought maybe Georgia should just get in a cover one and like maybe have Bullard or Malachi back and let the other guy just sit in the box and just spy Peyton Thorne, because that's where they were getting a lot of the stuff off the edge.
And it looked like they just weren't shedding blocks, right? I mean, it just kind of comes down to Auburn was eating them up on the outside there.
They didn't really have good run fits. There were one thing here, one thing there. One of the things that, and this is a great level set, Brandon, Kirby Smart, you can say he's protecting his team. You could say he's trying to make it clean up a mess on aisle 7. He just said, guys, I'm a veteran in the SEC. I'm a coaching veteran in the SEC. I've played in these ball games. I've coached in these ball games. He said, man, it's really tough to win on the road in the SEC. It's especially tough when you can't stop the run, and it's even more tough when you lose the turnover battle. He stressed composure and resiliency. One of the things that came out of the press conference, you can see it right now on Dog Nation's YouTube channels, is someone asked, our own Mike Griffith says, Kirby, I know you hate this. I know you hate individual accolades, but what do you think about Bowers for Heisman? Brought up the point, the guy's running the ball. It's
an appropriate question this particular time, I believe.
And he's like 157 yards receiving on 8 catches. He's like, guys, he talked about his grit, talked about his composure, talked about how he's one of the toughest kids, most competitive kids he's ever been around. And Kirby went down that door a little bit. He's like, I don't like this. I leave that for all you guys. But like, who else is who else plays better football? Who else means more than what Brock Bowers does?
I tell you what it reminds me of. We did some of the same stuff for Jordan Davis in 2021 when that conversation was going on. We were pushing the hashtag JD to NYC. You'll remember that, and Kirby Smart played along with that there. And I think it's important to note this. This is not the kind of thing that Kirby Smart would very easily do, but the fact that he does at least participate in that conversation, Bowers deserves that. Tonight's the appropriate time to have that conversation. So good for the question being asked. Good for Kirby Smart, at least on the basis of what you're saying there, giving, I think, a really appropriate answer. Smart's not going to rattle pots and pans. He's not going to be, Coach Prime in terms of, hyping his guys up. He's not going to call him Heisman, but the idea that he would at least even move in the direction of selling Brock for something like that, I think it's appropriate because of the nature of player that Brock Bowers is.
I think it's almost in the face of overwhelming evidence at this point with Brock Bowers. One of the things I do when I come on with Brandon after a show, when I come after the show, is one of the things I try to do is be very quick and concise about what we heard.
Too late.
You heard an appreciation for, you just wait, my friend. Just wait, my friend. It's kind of hard with you. Love you, buddy. But somebody asked a question about Peyton Woodring. Peyton, and then they were like, dude, 2 kicks. And Kirby was like, I think this young man has something special. He seeks out pressure kicks in practice. He wants the pressure kicks, and those were huge. I know everybody was keeping the receipts about shaky kicker, freshman, absolutely needed both of those boots, and he was.
And if he missed one today, this team probably would have wilted. I mean, I hate to say this, but if you would have added that into the mix of everything else, he had to make those 2 kicks tonight, and he did.
I'm going to tell you, Peyton is. I've said it on social media. I've been around this young man's family. I've seen what he did in high school. I've compared it to a lot of other players. That kid, what's that old movie, Made of the Right Stuff? That kid's made of the right stuff, Dog Nation.
So I'm going to tell you this, and I know you're like me. I've been coming here for a long time. There is something tonight that felt old school. And listen, and I realize that's only true because Georgia did not play up to the standard that we're used to seeing Georgia play. I get the reason why this felt the way that it did is in part because Georgia fell below expectations. This felt like coming over here back in a previous decade when just winning at Auburn felt like a big deal. And especially because the press box that we sit in is over here, that means we're looking towards the old scoreboard. You sort of feel like you're in the old, Jordan-Hare Stadium, not quite some of the newer stuff that they have on the other end. This was fun tonight, Jeff. And I don't want Georgia to play like this every single week. And if they play like this, they're not going to win the national championship. I get that. I don't know what the next phase of this season looks like, but I am really glad they won tonight.
So you're right. A lot of people were like, they couldn't remember the last time they were nervous about a Georgia football game again. Of course, you're smart. You can go back to Missouri last year on the road, another SEC game. There's so many things about this one that stick out. You got a grow-up card for your kicker. You got a grow-up card for Carson Beck. I'm going to stress that again. Down 10-0, down 17-10. Carson had to absolutely execute a lot tonight under duress. It was kind of funny. I'm just kind of mentally cataloging what everybody said. Some people call Brock Bowers a cyborg. Some people said he was a cheat code. Somebody says that's just Brock, man. Another guy said he's a 99 rating. I think that was Ladd McConkey. He was referencing the rating for Madden football players or NCAA football players. He called Brock Bowers a 99. You see all these things for this Georgia football game. One thing Kirby Smart said also that I hung my ear on a lot was he said, guys, it's the same thing UAB did to us, run game, quarterback, and we knew they were going to copy it, and we knew we prepared for it, but we just didn't execute that. That's another thing there with Georgia. People asked him, Kirby, I guess it just looks like you're a second-half team. And he's like, how do you get it to be a four-quarter team or a first-half team? And he's like, I wish I knew. He's like, we're just trying to get better. And I think it's very hard for people to realize that number one Georgia – people expect them to play like the number one team in the country. They're going to get everybody's best shot. But you got to remember, there's so many growth project players on this. But then at the end of the game, Brendan, I thought when they had to win it, who they lean on? They lean on Brock Bowers. Malachi Starks, one of the very best players on the football team, sealed that thing out. Kirby Smart, we said afterward, they were saying, Kirby, what did you think when Malachi got that interception? And somebody's waiting for some great thought or some, exhale by Kirby. You know what he said? He said, get down. And he says, you remember how many times Georgia's been in here on fourth down? You just knock it down. You don't make the pick. I guess he thought it was the national championship at Keeley. He's like, just get down. Malachi's a great open field runner, great broken.
And if we're going to talk about Brock Bowers, a Heisman candidate, listen, I think you got to talk about Malachi Starks right now.
All-American, that dude.
In the conversation with the Thorpe Award. I mean, this is a national award candidate right now, I believe. I think he's been Georgia's most important defensive player through 5 games. It's nice to see Mikael Williams back on the field. Oh, by the way, I need to correct myself on one thing. Somebody pointed this out. So Ra leaves the game with injury, but apparently he came back in. Somehow I just missed that.
Remember that catch he made? Remember that catch
Yeah,
he made?
huge catch. And listen, you see this now. Who is Georgia going to when it's got to move chains? Ladd gets a couple of big catches tonight. It's a Ra Thomas. There's some Dominic Lovett. There's a Marcus Rosemy-Jackson. The veteran receivers, the guys who have played the most in the SEC, that's the nucleus of Georgia's passing attack when it really has to. Second half, South Carolina. Second half tonight. You see the identity of this passing attack, kind of taking shape here. And I'm not saying it can't be Arian Smith. I'm not saying it couldn't be Jackson Meeks or couldn't be, whatever. But when Georgia really needs it, it's those veteran pass catchers, whether it be a transfer from Mississippi State or Missouri, or guys who've been here like Rosemy-Jackson or McConkey, and obviously Brock Bowers. Those are the guys that Georgia's going to.
Where would they be without the transfer portal at receiver right now, Brandon?
For sure.
Here's what I get, and this is we're going to try and dial up some perspective here. You and I, watched a lot of Georgia football over the years. Yeah. This team doesn't have an A.J. Green receiver. Let's say that. They don't have a Marvin Harrison or one of those All-American Biletnikoff Award guys, except for the tight end. But I don't know if I've ever seen the variety of dependability at wide receiver. You've got Ra growing right now. He's a growth project, but you've got Ladd now back. You've got Brock Bowers, of course. You got Dominic Lovett. You've got Marcus Rosemy-Jackson. I don't know if I've ever seen a Georgia receiver corps with as much veteran, steady hands to call on in a duress game like this.
I think that's true, and a lot of people are going to disagree with us on this, but I think that Jeff's actually right about this, that if you're looking for a building block for where you can go from here, I really do believe this is the best collection of wide receivers in the Kirby Smart era. I really do. And listen, I loved A.D. Mitchell, and you can go back and highlight obviously George Pickens individually. Probably no one's been better than he is, but in terms of the totality of the group here, this is the best crop of receivers. Now, think about that. That's a value add for what you can do from here, where you can go from here. That if Beck tonight grew up, many of you have said that he did, and your receivers you like, and I think that Jeff is well-founded in saying what he said, then maybe that's room for growth for the Georgia offense.
I mean, fans hate it, and they hate going to work tomorrow, and they jump on shows, and they got to say, lot to clean up. Got it, lot to clean up. But you stay unbeaten. But what you look at with this Georgia football team, still immensely talented, still a lot of guys getting better, and somehow they find a way to stay alive, stay unbeaten. Might even set up game day next week with Kentucky unbeaten.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, I mean, Texas, Oklahoma is obviously a factor in that conversation. But I would think that Georgia, Kentucky, which game day came to for 2021, I would say that's a candidate right now.
Yeah, and I mean, it really felt like survival. Like Kirby, I don't know how much you got to see at the end of the game, Brandon, but Kirby had the post-game interview with CBS. He had platitudes and superlatives for Brock and his team and resiliency, and then he comes around and he hugs his family, and he bear hugs his kids, and he keeps the arms around his kids, walking about 10 yards on the field, and then he goes down here and he's like, the fans go crazy because I think he tosses his red visor into the stand.
So to give you an idea, right over here to my left, this is the entrance where the Georgia team runs out, and kind of an old school vibe here, and that most of the Georgia fans, or at least a large number of them, are actually congregated right here at this particular area. I can remember every great win for Georgia I've ever seen here. It's always been this celebration right here at this particular corner of the stadium, and I was getting set up. I wasn't necessarily a part of it, but that did sort of feel like a return to that.
He tosses it in, and this is how color-coordinated Kirby is, right? He somehow goes into his equipment locker and comes out to his post-game press conference with a black visor, so he replaced that thing. He kind of went interchangeable.
He didn't want to go hat hair. Listen, if you're a two-time national champ, if you make $100 million, you can't show up to a press conference with hat hair.
It was kind of like
the PGA Tour guys do that little thing with their fingers. They kind of just sort of fluff it like that, and they kind of get the hair out. Perhaps Kirby's not quite ready for that, or perhaps at this stage maybe he doesn't quite have enough hair to fluff, which is something we can all relate to.
It's kind of like
except for you've got a lot of hair.
You said something earlier, Brandon. It's like it felt good a little bit.
It's fun. It's fun. I mean, I didn't love a lot about what Georgia did, but I'm on cloud 9 right now. This was a really fun win.
I mean, it's also one of those things where, remember Georgia used to come to Auburn and figure out how good they were? Figure out, we have a team, and it was like, usually they had to survive Florida, and then they get by Auburn, but that's when you knew you really had a football team. And I think you found some things out. The duress box has been checked. You know about Carson Beck now that he can do a lot of the things you need him to in a very big spot. And you can always just go to, Bowers. Like, here's the thing. You were talking about this earlier. Let me extrapolate one point. If you're the defensive coordinator and you got to say, let's stop Georgia's number one receiver, of course it's Bowers, right? Now, who's the other guy? Who's the other guy that you're like, okay, we got to put our second best corner, our second best defensive back on that guy?
Yeah, if he's fully healthy, it's Ladd. Now, Ladd's not fully healthy right now, but if it's fully healthy, it's Ladd. And I would say that, and this is a little bit of a surprise for me, but the third target for me right now is Ra-Ra.
Yeah, he looked great. And that juggling.
I thought that Dominic Lovett was in line for a better season than Ra-Ra is, but through 5 games, I believe I'm changing the pecking order on that a little bit.
I think it has to do with his size.
That's the thing is, like, I think of, like, Ra-Ra Thomas being Mississippi State. I think of every Mike Leach receiver being, 100-nothing pounds. In the case of Ra-Ra, he's pretty rocked up.
And another cool thing that you were going through everything that they were saying after the game is, Kirby was talking about Ladd, and I actually asked Ladd, I was like, what was the determination whether you could go or not? And he said, I had to have a full week of practice. I had to get through practice, and then I could go. He shared about how he has so many special memories in this building. Everybody remembers his breakout. I believe it was the 2021 season. After he redshirted in 2020, he caught that long touchdown pass right there. And he started talking about, like, how great it felt to be out there again, how much he appreciated what Carson was like in the huddle. He's like, dude, Carson, almost like he's sitting there ordering off the menu at a drive-thru. It was like very, very calm. Let's get this done. Let's do this. Let's execute. And Kirby also talked about, we didn't know how much we could get out of Ladd. Like, he didn't have a pitch count. He didn't have a rep count. But what Kirby did say is, like, we were going to see how much we had because he hadn't been practicing. It was really hot out here. And you can't just throw a guy in there and have him play rep after rep after rep.
So real quick here, another name I want to mention before we get ready to wrap up. Dejon Edwards can play on my team any day of the week, any year in Georgia football history. I'll take 11 Dejon Edwards, and I'll feel just fine with that. Now, the one almost fumble was just a bad call. That was just. I
don't know what they saw there.
Yeah,
the knee was down, the hand was down.
Honestly, these officials had a worse night than Georgia did for most of the evening, to be completely frank with you. But Dejon Edwards can play for me any time he wants.
Shout out South Georgia. Shout out Colquitt County.
Moultrie, Georgia, stand up.
Colquitt County. Now where would Georgia be without a Dejon as well? They tried Brock Bowers. I don't know. You've highlighted this a little bit, but Brock Bowers was in the backfield, almost in the backfield, in the eye, catching carries. They tried Cash Jones catching the ball out in the flat a little bit. They tried Kendall Milton. Did he get a carry? I thought he was trotting out, trying to go.
I don't remember that. I don't think so. Let me see. No carries for him tonight.
And then you sit there and see what they keep trying with Dylan Bell, and we didn't even mention Dylan as well. We went through those receivers.
Well, I want to just try to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall here before we're done. The other thing that you got to mention tonight, not a good day for the Georgia defense. But right down there on that end, 4th and very, very short from right there, in front of the goal line. Auburn chooses to get aggressive. Georgia blows it up. I believe it was Zion Logue who may have made that play right there. I think it was Logue. Y'all check me on that if I'm wrong. That was a big play in this game. That was a big play.
The one before the end of the half, or the one late in the game?
This is going back to, I believe it had been late second quarter, right?
Yeah, it was right before the half, and then it started that thing where Georgia got a possession and Auburn got a possession all within like the last minute.
It's a big play. If you let Auburn score right there, listen, everything feels different.
And it was a big play on third down, even to get to that 4th and short right there. I think you saw Shmuel Munden make the play on third, and I also think that Jamon Dumas-Johnson was in there on that 4th down stop as well. It really, like, I talked to Malachi Starks after the game, and he was like, man, it was really loud out here. He's like, I always wanted to kind of come and play in there. And, one of the things I thought about it for a second, and we're not trying to totally go for 3 and 23 momentum here. Malachi Starks has yet to lose a football game as a Georgia Bulldog.
I like that.
Think about that for a second.
I like that.
And then you've got –
that's interesting. If you were a first-year player last year – that's an interesting, and obviously Malachi's the guy that's played the most snaps from that group. That's a cool thing to consider because right now he's playing at a very, very high level.
There's no way he goes undefeated in his 3 seasons.
I'm doing the math in my head. Is that possible? Listen, right now we're just trying to beat Kentucky next week. At this point in time, that's where we are. And speaking of that, let's go ahead and get ready to go cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Let's just do rapid fire on a few of these. Kentucky absolutely gave it to Florida here today, setting up the undefeated matchup for next week. I think that Kentucky is a little bit of a dangerous opponent for Georgia right now. And frankly, I think in this next stretch for Georgia, with the exception possibly of Vanderbilt, they're all kind of dangerous for Georgia right now because That's just the nature of the season that Georgia's playing in here right now. So give me a quick thought on either Kentucky finding a way to stay undefeated, or right now what looks like a really problematic year 2 for Billy Napier. He's got at least 3 more losses coming here this year, I would say. And the idea of bowl eligibility and all that kind of stuff, that's very much up in the air for Florida right now.
Leave it to fellow media members to throw some, raw meat into the Sharks' cage a little bit. They asked Kirby after the game, hey, are you aware of Kentucky? Kentucky ran for over 300 yards on Florida. And Kirby made it very clear. We've heard this point before, but this is what Kirby Smart thinks about. He said, guys, our team was as beat up and as sore after the Kentucky game as any game we played last year. They're physical. They try to out Georgia. I don't know, Brandon, if Georgia can Georgia, Kentucky, the way they have in the last few years.
And I tell you what scares me. Finish your point. I'll make a point.
I mean, I think the way they would beat Kentucky is kind of a lot of Carson Beck and throwing that ball around. They just don't have the backs, because he talked about how it was a slobber knocker and how it was a war, and you had to grind out a victory. I don't know if Georgia's personnel is set up to do that.
What scares me about Kentucky right now is I mentioned this, I think it was Dog Nation Daily on Friday, and I mentioned it on a couple of things today, including our show here a moment ago. Coming into today, I don't know how today's game changed it, but coming into today, this is the 3rd slowest team in the country. Kentucky's only running about 55 plays per game. So if you get into a situation where you have another scoreless first quarter, Georgia's only scored 17 first quarter points all season long. If you have another slow offensive start to your first quarter, and if you let Kentucky get it, they have a tendency to just want to keep it, and that clock ticks and ticks and ticks and ticks. This is where Kentucky concerns me. Honestly, I don't see a lot of playmakers when I look at the Wildcats here right now, but I do see that.
Looks nice.
Yeah, the back, Davis, whatever his name is, Ray Davis had a nice day today for sure. 280 yards on the ground. So obviously he's good. But I think that Leary's been okay. Leary, is it Leary or Leary? Either way, the NC State transfer. I think he's been okay. But the point here is that they have a tendency to kind of want to exploit where Georgia's vulnerable, not always taking the most advantage of its possessions, not always being efficient with its possessions. Kentucky can really make you pay on that.
And the other thing, Brandon, let's just look at a common thread. UAB hurt Georgia in run game. Quarterbacks that run around have hurt this Georgia defense so far. And maybe it's because you don't have the alpha fire-breathing dragon up front. You don't have that true first-round, second-round guy. But you see Peyton Thorne running around the place like he's Mike Vick a little bit. You see, the previous week UAB did the same things to Georgia as well. You've seen in earlier games this year. One of the things the players all said is hate seeing those rushing yards give up. I asked Malachi, I said, Malachi, can you remember the last time your defense was such a gashed in the run game? And he was like, I'm just not. He was like, his reaction was no reaction. He's like, I don't see that. We don't.
And they had a couple of plays. They had Malachi parked almost at the line of scrimmage. They were trying to do everything they could to break this up, and obviously a lot today. It was just simply not working, no matter what they tried. All right, let's do a couple more here really quick. At least by appearance of the score, Missouri no problem with Vanderbilt. This is a Tigers team that's quietly really playing some good football. That's a team ranked in the top 25. A lot of people wondered, could they make it look easy against Vanderbilt, just given kind of what they've been through the last couple of weeks. And at least based on the score that I'm seeing, they kind of did. Missouri right now, I would say, is one of the real surprise in the SEC. A lot of teams not really playing up to expectations. Missouri so far exceeding expectations.
I mean, it's one of those things when people are going to do the autopsy on Georgia's triage on Georgia's record and their schedule strength and their opponent's one loss. You see what Kentucky has. You see what Missouri has. These are a lot of teams that are already unbeaten in the SEC. What is it? There's only 3 remaining teams left unbeaten in the SEC, right?
Kentucky, Missouri, Georgia, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, Brandon. You jumped on this show, and I know you do opening thoughts, and you said this is how I feel. Do you call this a survival? Do you call it outlast? Like, what's the word that comes to your mind about this game?
I think it's a survive type situation, and I think that what I said is that I don't know where this team goes from here, but I am glad they won tonight. I am glad they survived. They took Auburn's best shot tonight, and they found a way to win, and that's a good thing. And that may be, I know some people are like, Disney dog, whatever. Like, I don't care. I don't care what you want to think about me for being happy that Georgia found a way to get this one done. This winning streak is now 20-whatever games. I don't know how much longer into the future it goes, but, boy, it goes on for another week, and I love that.
Here's what the way I look at it, Brandon. Are they unbeatable? No. Are they dominating? No. But they're still awfully hard to beat. They're still awfully hard to put down. And that's even with a changeover on offense with a lot of players. Like, you wonder, There was a turnover. There were a couple of turnovers, and then I thought I used the word. I tweeted out teetering because Georgia was really teetering.
Yeah.
They
were on the ropes.
They were wobbly. It was maybe your favorite Creed movie a little bit, especially like when the fumble that they had to overturn right there. I don't know if Georgia could have came back from that one either. Another short field that they got, and finally people opened their eyes and they looked at the film and they're like, "Oh yeah, clearly that's not a fumble."
Yeah, a couple of those fumbles were just bizarre. The one to Bowers already stood back up again. Like the fact that it even had to be reviewed is an embarrassment. All right, a couple more scores. Can we do a couple more right quick? Texas A&M beats Arkansas. 2 takeaways here. We love Sam Pittman. I openly root for him. Sam needs to start winning some games. They've had some heartbreakers the last couple of weeks, big leads they haven't been able to hold on to. They needed this rivalry game here today against A&M, not able to get it. And very quietly, Texas A&M is figuring some things out offensively. I'm looking at 34 total points. I will admit to not knowing exactly how they came together, but all of a sudden what we figured out is Miami's actually pretty good. So the loss at Miami for A&M right now does not look too bad, and I think that pound for pound, A&M may have among the very best collection of wide receivers in the SEC here right now. Max Johnson does not appear to be a great drop-off right now from where Connor Wegman was.
That's the point you made right there is perfect because Alabama can't find a quarterback, but apparently Texas A&M's got 2 or 3. You see Mac Johnson, and they score after a gut punch about losing a future first-round type talent in Connor Wegman. You see Max Johnson come off the bench, and he's benefiting from that time he had at LSU. But that's a team. I mean, Brandon, who knows, man? That might be the one to come out of the West. I don't think you're outlandish in saying that.
They're a factor in the race right now. Obviously, that'd be a big step up from where A&M has been. But at this particular time, A&M is a factor in the SEC West race. Now, speaking of that, LSU is taking a lead on Ole Miss here right now, but that's 35-31. I think one of the real stories is this LSU defense right now. They brought in a bunch of transfers, first 10 transfers on defense, try to upgrade their performance there, and they haven't gotten it. And obviously Ole Miss is a team that's used to scoring, and they're clearly playing at home here. But the LSU defense right now has a little bit of a problem, whether they ultimately win this game here or not. Remember, this is Brian Kelly's first game on the road against a top 25 team. This is being the LSU coach. That's a little bit of a different step up in weight class for him than where he's been. And obviously Tennessee, South Carolina right now, first quarter coming to an end. Vols on top there, 14-10, in a game that I think is actually really fun. In fact, I'm hopeful we'll be able to get out of here and try to find a way to at least follow some of these games here a little bit. So that's Cruising Around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Make sure you check out our good friend Jessica Slater online. You can email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. You can give her a call. You hear me give the number all the time, royaldogs.com. Website you can go to find out about the Dog Nation cruise, but also big things for Royal Caribbean here in 2024. Icon of the Seas debuts in January. Utopia of the Seas debuts in July. How about the brand new Hideaway Beach coming to Perfect Day Coco Cay? You and I were talking about that the other day about what a fun new adults-only kind of a Vegas pool party style vibe that Hideaway Beach is going to have. Going to be an amazing thing. So Jessica Slater can tell you all about it. If you go to royaldogs.com, you can royaldogs.com. You can click in there and get to Jessica, or you can email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. Phone number probably on your screen here too. You can just give her a call. I say it every day on Dog Nation Daily. By now, hopefully you got that memorized. I just don't happen to have it in front of me here right now, but we love Jessica. Great travel agent, specially selected for us by Royal Caribbean for some really fun stuff here in 2024. All right, stage is yours, Jeff. Give us a final thought, then we're going to wrap up because I believe the folks here at Auburn are about ready to kick us out of the stadium.
I've got a little PTSD. I'm like looking over my shoulder waiting for somebody to come by with a lawnmower. How many of these things we've done on the road with the lawnmowers trying to crank?
Yeah, we've had a few. There's actually a little something like that going on a little earlier because that pretty much always happens on the field at some point in time.
And my final thought is you got to feed your horses. Brock Bowers, I was actually had a point of contention about our 4 horsemen type thing because I couldn't give it to a guy that was currently, creating his resume, still establishing his legacy. It's a given. He is that. He is that guy. Like I think you made a point earlier while I was working on some other stuff for our website, is that you don't really know that Brock Bowers had a clutch gene, but he certainly does. Some of those balls. I thought the one that Carson Beck threw to set up the field goal. There was one in the first half where Carson put it too far away, and then this time Carson had realized he had tight coverage again, so he put it on the opposite shoulder, and Brock just caught something like this and came with it, and it's still very hard to bring down. You know how often Auburn's very hard, and Kirby gave a lot of compliments to Auburn's defensive coordinator and how well they block, destruct, and how they attack the run game, and he's like, Brandon, I know this because this is SEC football. How many times do you think they saw video this week about Brock Bowers throwing somebody on the ground? Don't be that clip on social media. Don't be that guy on TikTok or whatever. And they tried to gang tackle Bowers, and Bowers was just still so effective. I mean, he had a little bit of his season started off because he maybe it was an injury, maybe he wasn't fully healthy. But he's in the midst of putting together some more very, very, very high points in his Georgia career.
I think it's really good stuff, Jeff. Really good final thought from you. Now, for my final thought, I want to speak to you candidly here just for a moment. And perhaps it's because I'm a little punchy. I haven't slept a lot the last couple of days, been traveling around watching a lot of good football, or maybe it's just the emotion of the moment, standing here with my good friend Jeff Sintel on a field where we've seen some really wild Georgia-Auburn games over the years. I'm not really quite so sure what leads me to want to be so introspective here, but to close things out today, I just want to say, as candidly as I possibly can, obviously I would like for Georgia to have played better than it did tonight. But if any of Georgia's struggles, if any of Georgia's current issues gave Auburn fans the thought that maybe they might win this game, and therefore they are now more disappointed because of the loss than they otherwise would be, then everything that happened on this field tonight was absolutely, totally worth it. Because those folks being unhappy makes me very, very happy. As the saying goes, I do not care for Auburn, and very, very happy to see it go down the way that it did.
Shoot a hole in this, whether you think. I think my personal introspection on the Georgia football team right now, I think you learned a lot more about this football team with this nail-biter Larry Munson saved yourself win than if Georgia would have beaten them 34-10. I think, it's not what everybody wants. It's not the style points. But you really know now that this team, when it's challenged, this quarterback, this kicker, a lot of areas that you thought, a little wobbly, little teetering, I think you learned a lot more about this Georgia team through the adversity tonight than you would if this was just kind of a boring 20-7 win or 27-7 win when Georgia controlled the whole thing. Again, they won being on the way, way wrong side of the rushing yards ledger and the way, way wrong side of the turnover ledger.
By the way, I promise we've got to go. It's so late. Everybody's ready to go home. Let me just say one more thing here, too. What about the fake Auburn injuries tonight? That actually hasn't come up in the show yet.
I was thinking about it. That's prime low-hanging fruit for you.
Hugh Freeze violating the SEC rulebook as if it were his marriage vows. I mean, we got to talk more about that at some point in time. Tonight there's too much to talk about. That's a disgrace. And listen, Auburn's no stranger to disgrace. That was a disgrace.
I mean, I saw it over and over again. I even was like, it's funny, Brandon. Georgia makes a big chunk first down, and somehow the Auburn player goes down, and then immediately he pops back up after a break. And, folks, if you don't know football, that slows down tempo of Georgia's offense. It allows guys to get moving around, allows the defense to get reset, and that was when Auburn had to be planned for the way they would slow down Georgia on offense.
Did not like it, not one bit. But we do like this. Georgia gets the win tonight, 27-20 against Auburn. Coming to Jordan-Hare Stadium, loud crowd, tough environment, dogs, walk-away winners. Who knows where it's all going from here? Is it go for 3-23? Is it 15-0 once again? Still too early to tell. Obviously, UGA's got plenty to work on, but the winning streak does extend one more week, and it comes tonight against a hated rival. So thanks for talking about it with us here on the Dog Nation Postgame Show. We'll see you back next week at the UGA bookstore. Of course, Monday for Dog Nation Daily. Jeff's got you plenty of good recruiting stuff online at dognation.com throughout the week there as well. Thanks for some great calls, fun interaction. Love doing this show, especially after a Georgia win. Thanks for being a part of it. Good night, everybody.